Welcome back to the arcade. In our last video, I went ahead and tested 3 complete board sets for the GORF arcade game, and we found some good boards and some bad boards. We found some boards had the tantalum capacitors were shorted because we seen smoke, and we had at least one board that the capacitor had already been was burning too, and I'd already removed half of it one time before, but that board is still good even though the capacitor has been taken out of circuit. As well as we found out with a couple of the other boards, when I clipped the capacitors out of circuit and removed the short, the boards went to working. So what I plan on doing in this video is we're just going to focus on first the RAM boards. And we have 6 of them because there's 2 boards in each set. So 3 sets of boards, we have 6 RAM boards. So we're going to start out with the data that we collected in the last video when we did the actual test in the card cage in the game. And even though the board, if the board tested good, like board number 1 here, it tested good, but that's the one that had the burnt capacitor that was already taken out of circuit. So what I plan to do is we're going to test these tantalum capacitors. We're going to test them in circuit, and then I'm going to unsolder one side of the ones that are still in the board, and we're going to test them out of circuit to see if there's a difference, whether you can reliably test them in circuit or if you really need to take them out of circuit to test them. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with board number 1 here, and what I have is my Peak Electronic Designs Atlas ESR Plus meter, model ESR70, and this is mostly for checking capacitors, but you can always check the ESR of capacitors and low resistance. So it's also an ohm meter for very low resistance, which I've never used it for that, but I believe you can use it to trace shorts on circuit boards. That's how fine the low resistance measurements is. But today we're just going to use this for checking the tantalum capacitors. So let's get started, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make up another list here, and I'm going to start out with the RAM boards, board number 1, and we're going to check C1, C2, and C3 because it's 3 tantalum capacitors on each board. C1 is here, C2, and then C3. And I'm going to write down the value in circuit and out of circuit. And for the rest of them, I just put IC for in circuit and OC for out of circuit. So first we'll go ahead and do ROM board number 1 and check these. And I'll show you how to do it here. Let me zoom in. So hopefully you'll be able to see the meter and the capacitors. Now this capacitor meter has a built-in self-discharge in case you're testing capacitors that has a higher charge in it. Like let's say if you're testing capacitors in a CRT monitor, it will self-discharge the capacitor. Some capacitor checkers won't do this, and you have to discharge the capacitor ahead of time, or the voltage might mess up your equipment. But these little capacitors here won't hold a charge that would even hurt it, so it really doesn't matter. But I'm just telling you what I know about this particular ESR meter as in the specifications in the book. So anyway, all we have to do is turn it on or hit the test button, and it goes into monitoring for a component. So let's do C1, which is the one right here. And it says it's a cap, 16.19 microfarads, and the ESR of 0.20 ohms. So that's pretty close to the value. These are 15 microfarad tantalum capacitors. So let me write that down. 16.19. All right. We can't test number 2 because number 2, or actually C2, is already burning 2. So we can't test that one. So we'll go to C3 and let's test it. And that's giving us a reading of 21.94 microfarads. And that's in circuit. Okay, so now let's go ahead and remove one leg of each one of these capacitors here so we can test it out of circuit. And I'm gonna, let's see, desolder the nub out on the one that's gone. Hope I didn't suck it up in my gun. And I think it did, but it's gone through. Okay, forgot about that. All right, let's see if we got these loose. That one's loose. That one's not quite loose. Okay, we got that loose. I need to get better organized here. Okay, now let's check C1 again with it out of circuit. Out of circuit, we're getting 1534. All right, C3. 15.01. microfarads. Okay, so that tells me that the reading is slightly different. It's very close for C1. C1 was 16.19 microfarads in circuit and 15.34 microfarads out of circuit. C3 was 21.94 microfarads in circuit and 15.01 out of circuit. So it's close, but you get a more accurate reading out of circuit. I would say that the two capacitors in C1 and C3 are good, and I guess I could go ahead and replace them, but I don't think I'm going to have enough to replace everything. So for the time being, I'm just going to replace C2, which is the one that's burning too. Okay, well, I finished with RAM board number 1, and as you can see, I replaced C2, brand new tantalum cap, and the outer circuit for C1 was 15.34 microfarads, and after I put the new C2 in, that was reading 16.38 microfarads, and C3 out of circuit was reading 15.01. So they are closer out of circuit than in circuit, except for in circuit C2, the new one I put in circuit was 16.38. So you're better off to check these capacitors out of circuit, but you can come pretty close in circuit. So anyway, let's move on to board number 2. I've already checked these in circuit, but I decided we're going to go ahead and do these on camera here, because this board has different titanium capacitors. They're made by a different manufacturer. The other ones are made by Kermit. These are made by Temple, but they're still 15 microfarads, but at 25 volt instead of 20 volt. So these look to be old enough to be factory, so I would imagine that they just, at different times when they were building these boards, they just had different suppliers. So let's go ahead and test these in circuit and see how close they come to the 15 microfarads. Okay, C1 is showing 26.31 microfarads. Okay, C2 is showing 22.59, and C3 23.82. So they're much higher than what they are rated at in circuit. So let me go ahead and take these out of circuit, and we'll check them again. All right, let's see if we got them. It's one down. C2. Okay, this time we got all three. Now let's go ahead and test them out of circuit. And see what the difference is. Okay. C1 out of circuit. $19.95. All right. C2. 21.76. And C3, 20.68. Okay. Well, the only one that's even close is C1 out of circuit. None of them are close in circuit. C1 is 26.16 in circuit, but 1995 out of circuit. And C2 is 22.46 microfarads in circuit and 21.76 microfarads out of circuit. C3 is 23.82 microfarads in circuit and 20.68 microfarads out of circuit. They're not shorted, but their value is definitely off a little bit. So I believe I should go ahead and replace all three of these just to be on the safe side. It might be that I don't have to, but I think I'd feel better if I did. So let me go ahead and replace those, and then we'll go to board number 3. Okay, RAM board number 2 now has 3 new tantalum caps in it, and after I installed them in circuit, the new caps, C1 has a reading of 16.03 microfarads. C2 has a reading of 15.94 microfarads. And C3 has a reading of 16.32 microfarads. So they're a whole lot closer in circuit with new caps in there. So I would say that when you're testing them, they ought to be fairly close, within a 1 microfarad of the value, 1 to 2 microfarads. If they're not, then they're a little bit out of tolerance, and you might want to consider replacing them with new ones, because they do have a history of going bad and burning up, shorting out. So that's probably your best bet. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the boards, and when I get done, we'll come back and go over some more figures. Okay, well, I'm back pretty quick. I found something interesting on board number 3. It turns out most of the time the capacitors that I find on the RAM boards that are burnt up are C2, the one that's in the middle here. All right, well, I checked C1, and C1 is 17.27 microfarads in circuit. I don't see a problem with that. And C3, the one on the bottom here, is 20.77. That's a little high, but not a real big problem. But C2, the one in the middle, let me show you what that one says. This is in circuit. Coming back in circuit leaky, ESR 0.13 ohms. So I would say that one is in the process of becoming a short circuit. So that appears to be bad. So let me go ahead and take that one out of circuit and measure it and see what it says out of circuit. Okay. Go ahead and clip it on the lead that I just desoldered. And let's see what it says. It still says in circuit leaky, ESR 0.16. So that's definitely bad. So we're going to go ahead and change that one. And I'll probably go ahead real quick and just take the other two out of circuit. I might wind up replacing all three. So let me figure this out and we'll be right back. All right, well, board number 3, I went ahead and replaced C2 with a new tantalum capacitor, and the new capacitor reading in circuit reads 15.94 microfarads, which is the same thing the new capacitor I put in the number 2 board was also reading 15.92. So anyway, that leaky capacitor is gone, so this board should be good to go. Now I left the two other ones in here, C1 and C3, because out of circuit, C1 was reading 16.62 microfarads and C3 was reading 16.21, so they're well within tolerance. So this board should be good to go. So now let's move on to board number 4. Okay, we're back with board number 4, and here's something strange that I just found out when I was testing these in circuit. I C1 here, again 16.16 microfarads, that's fine. Then when I went to C2, it's reading in circuit leaky, ESR of 0.21 ohms. Then when I check C3, same thing, in circuit leaky, 0.22 ohms. Now I took them out of circuit, and when I took them out of circuit, they tested good. C1 out of circuit was 15.11 microfarads, C2 was 15.42, and C3 was 16.21. All right, so I put them back in circuit and checked them again, and then they were checking good. So I thought, well, that's strange. What's going on here? So what I did was I took these two leads. Now, there's not supposed to be any difference between the two leads. I switched them around and C2 again, and I get a reading of 16.12 microfarads. But if I turn the leads back around and put them on here, in circuit leaky. So that's strange. I wonder if that's just because it's a tantalum capacitor, or whether it's just something to do with this meter here. So in the future, make a note, if you have one of these meters, if you're testing a capacitor in circuit and it says it's leaky, reverse the leads around and check it again. I don't know why it has that effect on it, but it seems to be okay. I tested them out of circuit, and out of circuit it doesn't matter which leads you put on, but it must have something to do with the circuit. And maybe when I was testing the other boards 1 through 3, I just happened to get the right combination here. So anyway, that's just something to keep in mind. So anyway, all 3 of these test good, in circuit and out of circuit. So board number 4, as far as the tantalum capacitors go, should be okay. Okay, finished board number 5. When we did our initial test, this board is the one that capacitor was smoking on it, and I wasn't sure which one was doing the smoking. So when I did the initial test, I clipped all 3 of these out of circuit. Just went ahead and cut the leads on one side, and the board is working with the capacitors cut. So I went ahead and tested them out of circuit, since I'd already cut them, and C1 was 16.10 microfarads. C2 was leaky, and it didn't matter which direction I put the leads from the tester, it was leaky. So that's the one that was starting to smoke. And C3 was reading 14.48 microfarads. But since I clipped all 3 of them, I went ahead and just removed all 3 and replaced them with all new capacitors. So the new ones, after I put them in circuit, C1, I didn't write them down. So let's do them real quick. Okay, C1 is 16.24, and if I reverse the leads, I'm getting 16.35. So we'll say 16.24 in circuit. Now C2, getting 18.01. If I reverse the leads, I'm getting 16.05. So we'll just say 16.05. And C3, getting 15.94, reverse the leads. I see this one here says leaky if I reverse the leads. So we'll reverse the leads back. $15.89. And I checked all these before I put them in, and they were all reading just a little over 15. So they're reading like a new capacitor. Okay, so this board was working in the game after I clipped these capacitors out. So with new capacitors in, this board should work. But we'll test it in the game and find out for sure. So we got one more board to go, board number 6. Okay, I just finished up board number 6. In our initial test, board number 6 was tested good. Had no problems, but we wanted to check the capacitors anyway. So in circuit, C1 was giving me a reading of 15.76 microfarads. C2 is giving me 16.21, and C3 is giving me 15.42 microfarads. I went ahead and took one side out of circuit and checked it, and C1 was giving me 1493, C2 was giving me 1558, and C3 is giving me 1474. And I reversed the leads on the capacitor tester, and everything was good in both directions. So this board should be good to go. Of course, there was nothing wrong with it to start with, but now we're pretty sure that the capacitors will be okay for a little while anyway. You never know when one's going to fail, but I could have went ahead and changed them and put new ones in it, but I'm just going to leave them in and roll the dice and see what happens with it. Okay, so now we can take all 6 boards over to the game, and just like we did in the last video, we're going to go ahead and check each one of these boards again and see if we have any improvements from the initial test, because when we tested them before, of course 2 of them we had shorts on the capacitors. After I clipped the capacitors, the boards were working, but we still had one board number 3, which was completely dead. The game just wouldn't boot up. And number 3, we found out that C2 was leaky both in and out of circuit. And I replaced C2 on that board with a new capacitor. So it's possible that if that cap was leaking, it could have caused that board not to work if it was getting ready to completely short out. And let's see. Also, board number 4, the game booted up, but it had horizontal yellow lines. Now that could be just bad RAM on the board, but see, number 4. I didn't write down if I put in new caps on that one. I don't think I did. I think they all tested good. So that board probably is not going to work. It's probably got a bad RAM on it. Let me see. Board number 5. That one had a bad capacitor on C2 that was also smoking. And on board 5, I mean, yeah, C2 was leaky, so I went ahead and replaced all 3 with new caps. So, but that board was good with the when I cut the caps, so that board should still be good, and now with new caps on it, won't have to worry about that. So we could just put in those 2 dead boards, but Might as well go through all of them and see what happens. Okay, now we got all 6 RAM boards, got all the tantalum capacitors checked. The ones that were bad are replaced with new ones. The original ones were checked, so they should be good. So now let's go ahead and test the boards in the game again and see if we get any different results. Okay, well let's go ahead and test these RAM boards. The game is up and running with my original boards. And GORF is talking away. Yeah, we know. Okay. Just like we did it before, we'll take out the first RAM board. And let's put in board number 1. Okay, let me get my notes here. Now, board number 1, when we originally tested it the other day, was good, but it had the tantalum capacitor and C2 had been burned up, and one half of it had been already cut out of circuit, but the board was good. So we replaced the caps on it, so and let's see what happens. Okay. Game is up and running. That's no surprise. Let it go into track mode here. Okay. That board is still good, but with the caps replaced, it should be good to go. Alright, board number 2. Alright, board number 2 is also good. And but I replaced the caps on them anyway because they were out of spec. They were a little bit on the high side. Okay, should still work. Okay, the game came up. It's strange though, when I had the other boards in, my board and the other board, when you first turned it on, I had sound and I had speech. Right now I have nothing. So let's let it go into track mode. Maybe it's random when it boots up. Okay, well, there's sound, so it must just be a random thing. Anyway, that board looks good. So board number 2 should be good to go. Board number 3. All right, on our original test, board number 3 was bad. The game was dead. In other words, we didn't get anything on the monitor. So, but we did find C2 was leaky and about to short. So I replaced C2. So let's see if that had any effect, and maybe it fixed the board, maybe it didn't. Let's find out. Well, at least this time the game is booting up, but yeah, we definitely still have a RAM problem, so that the board probably has some bad RAM on it. Let's try reseating it one time, just to be on the, make it consistent. Okay, that time we got speech. Okay, well that did a little bit different, but it's still basically the same. Let's wait and see if it goes into a track mode and see if it changes any. Okay, yeah, this definitely looks like bad RAM. Now there's a program that Mark Speth wrote, I believe, and that if you burn the test ROM, I believe it'll tell you which one of the RAM is bad on the board. But anyway, maybe I'll look into that. I don't know. Okay, well, board number 3 is bad RAM. So board number 4. All right, original test, board number 4 was bad and had yellow horizontal lines. And board 4, the capacitors seemed like they were okay, so we didn't change any. So that should be no different.
Insert join.
Yep. Basically looks like the board we just checked. So just curious, let's go, let it go into a track mode and see if it looks the same as the other board.
Insert
Yep.
join.
A little different, a little worse than the other board, but basically it's got bad RAM, I'm sure. Okay. Let's try board number 5. All right, our original test, board number 5 was bad. We had smoke, but the board was good when I cut all the caps. So number 5, yeah, number 5, C2 was leaky, shorting out. But I went ahead and replaced all 3 caps. So this board should work. And it's got new caps on it, so it ought to be good to go. And the game comes up. We'll just let it go into track mode to make sure it looks good.
Insert join.
All right. Board number 5 It's working and should be good to go, all new caps. Now, board number 6. All right, originally board number 6 was good. I checked board number 6 and all the caps checked out fine. So I didn't replace any of the caps on number 6. So it should be working fine. Okay, looking good.
Insert join.
All right.
Long live GORF.
Board number 6 is working fine. I'll put my original board back in. And make sure it's still working.
Insert join.
And game looks good. So I think we're all good on that. Okay, well, what did we do? Well, we didn't fix any boards by replacing the caps, although we did fix the ones that we cut out of circuit that made them work. And now we've replaced the caps on those boards, so those boards are back up and ready to be used in a game. So, but we still have 3 bad boards, three out of 6. Okay, well, that's all we can do to that. The only thing we can do is get that test ROM and put it on one of the boards and see if we can't test that. But since I'm gonna, if I'm able to send these boards off to be repaired, then I might just go ahead and send those 2 and not worry about it right now. I'm gonna go ahead and check the other boards, check the tantalum capacitors on those 2, see if we have any bad ones on those. And when I was editing the video from the first test, I noticed that on the programmed RAM boards, the first one was good and the second 2 were bad. I did notice that on the second board, board number 14, the board has 8 2114 RAMs on it, RAM chips. And I didn't notice it when I was testing the board, but 6 of the RAMs were missing. The sockets were empty. It only had 2 RAM on it. So there's no way that board would be good without the RAM. I don't know what happened. Somebody, I guess, might have needed some 2114 RAM and they just took them off the board. Maybe the board is still bad with the RAM, but I do have plenty of 2114 RAM, so I'll go ahead and repopulate it. And as a matter of fact, I'll probably just take it out of the good boards because I know that's tested good, although the ones I have are supposed to be new. But if you take them out of a good working board, you know they're good. So we'll go ahead and swap the 2114 RAM chips into the bad board and see if maybe the only problem is the RAM chips are missing. And of course, board number 15, the program RAM board, was resetting. That could have because of bad RAM too, so we might replace the RAM in that board and see if it fixes it. Also on the game logic board we had one of them had a capacitor that was smoking, so like I say, we're going to go through the tantalum capacitors, and any bad ones we're going to go ahead and replace them. It may not fix the boards, but at least the capacitors will be already checked out, and that'll be one thing you can cross off the list of possible problems. Okay, well that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you like this kind of thing, be sure to subscribe, like, leave a comment, good or bad. And until next time, this is just another arcade fix. Have you had your arcade fix today?